The studio lights were cold, bright, unforgiving. Meghan. Markle stepped out from the dark wings of the backstage hallway and into the light. The applause from the audience was warm, even thunderous, but it did little to calm the sharp pulse in her throat. She smiled. That calm, poised smile the world had learned to admire and question in equal measure. But behind it, she knew this wasn't just an interview. Something felt off. Hours earlier, the energy backstage had been smooth. Her team had gone over every detail with the producers. They had agreed no royal gossip, no personal attacks. The focus would be on her humanitarian work, her recent visit to Rwanda, and her mental health advocacy projects. It was supposed to be a conversation about purpose. But now, as she waited in the green room, a junior assistant from her team rushed in with a worried look and a folder clutched to her chest. "They changed the final cue cards," she whispered. "There's a section called Current Controversies. We specifically asked them to cut that." Meghan's expression didn't change. She closed the folder calmly, but her eyes darkened. "Did you speak to Colbert's team?" "They say it's just for flow, nothing aggressive." She nodded, though the words echoed like static in her ears. Flow. She had heard that word before the night before the Sun had run a headline calling her princess pushy. She had heard it before Oprah, before the Netflix cameras rolled, for every moment someone in the media shaped her life for consumption. Now, again, she stood in silence, adjusting her white blazer. Her mind drifted back, not to fame, not to royalty, but to fear. The kind of fear her husband Harry had tried to escape when he said, "I won't lose another woman to this machine." Diana. The name was never spoken out loud anymore, but it lingered between them always, like smoke. A stagehand gave her a 5-minute warning. The noise outside was building. The audience was ready. She walked to the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Her heart felt louder than her steps. A producer approached with a polite smile. "Stephen's in a playful mood tonight. Should be a fun one," she nodded. Fun, the kind of fun where you were cornered by charm, boxed in by laughter, and then left to bleed in the name of entertainment. The intro music blared. Lights dimmed, then surged. Stephen Colbert walked onto the stage, full of energy and polish. The crowd roared. He greeted them with his signature smirk and quick-fire jokes before finally turning toward her entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle." She stepped into view. The applause came again, thunderous and kind. She smiled, waved, and took her seat beside Stephen. For the first few minutes, everything went as planned. Talk of her children, her favorite hiking spots in Montecito. Jokes about Prince Harry trying to understand American slang. The audience laughed. Meghan relaxed slightly. She felt the rhythm of control returning to her. Then the first shift. Colbert leaned forward just slightly. His voice lowered half a register. A different tone entered the room. "You know, Meghan, a lot of people are wondering what was the real reason you and Harry left the royal family. Was it really just mental health? Or was there something else behind the scenes?" The laughter faded. A few audience members shuffled in their seats. Meghan held her breath a moment before answering. "We made a decision for our family. Yes, mental health played a big role. But I've spoken about this before." Colbert cut in with a smile. "Right, but some critics say the real reason was control. Owning the narrative. You're producing shows, podcasts, books. Don't you think that's the same media attention you claim to escape?" A low murmur moved through the audience. Meghan's smile didn't break, but her eyes did. "For a fraction of a second, there's a difference," she said quietly. "Between ownership and abuse. I don't reject media. I reject distortion." Soft applause, measured, but not warm. Colbert chuckled, leaned back in his chair. Sure. But you've built a media empire now. Is that accountability or just rebranding?" Another soft laugh from the audience. One that stung more than silence. Megan blinked slowly, breath caught in her throat. Her team, watching from backstage, froze. And somewhere, in an embassy office in London, a British intelligence officer was watching the live feed with keen interest. He took a note, a name, a timestamp. The plan had worked. Would you like me to continue with the next part based on your outline? Backstage, the silence was louder than the cheers echoing from the studio. Megan's team stood still, their eyes locked on the monitor. The interview was continuing, but they knew it had already crossed a line. Something deeper was unfolding, something calculated, and Megan. She could feel it too, sitting across from Stephen Colbert, who was smiling just a bit too wide. Her throat was dry, her palms were cold, but she didn't flinch. "I think," she said calmly, "it's easy to judge someone for protecting their peace when you've never had to fight for your own." Colbert raised an eyebrow. "So, stepping away from royal duties, from tradition that was peace for you." She looked him in the eye. Yes, it was survival. The audience was quiet again. No laughs this time, no soft applause. Just a strange stillness, as if they didn't know how to respond. And for the first time, Megan felt something familiar. Isolation wrapped in bright lights. But it wasn't just an uncomfortable moment on a late-night show. It was bait, and she had walked straight into it. In London, across the Atlantic, inside a soundproof room within a government facility, a screen showed the same interview, in real time. A man with silver hair and a stern face stood behind a technician. "She's slipping," the man said. "Push her further." The technician nodded and sent a subtle message to a producer in New York. It was a network of quiet signals built over years. A handshake here, a contract clause there. Influence hidden in plain sight. Back on set, Colbert checked his notes, then chuckled as if reading something that amused him personally. "Let's shift gears a little," he said, with a grin. "Heard a rumor you were recently contacted by someone from within Buckingham Palace? Care to share what that was about? That wasn't in the script?" Megan knew it instantly. Her jaw tightened just slightly. She hesitated. The air grew heavier. "I don't speak about private conversations," she replied. Colbert leaned forward. "Even if they have national implications." The room fell dead silent. That phrase, national implications, wasn't casual. It was a signal. Megan's mind raced. Who gave him that line? Where had it come from? "Stephen," she said, choosing her words carefully, "this isn't about politics. This is about people, about my family." "But you're no ordinary family, are you?" he said, smiling tightly. "The world listens when you speak." There it was again, the pressure to reveal, to explain, to confess. Megan took a breath and turned slightly toward the audience. Sometimes people confuse attention with power. "I'm not here to hold power. I'm here to hold space for voices that don't get heard." Polite applause followed. But the mood had changed. Colbert glanced at his producers. A message flashed on his screen. "Ask about the Rwanda files." He raised his eyes slowly, almost unsure. "So, Megan," he said, feigning casual interest, "you mentioned your recent humanitarian work in Rwanda. Any truth to the whispers about leaked documents, government correspondence that you weren't supposed to see?" This time, Megan went still. Her hands gripped the edges of the chair. She hadn't told anyone. Only her closest inner circle knew about the encrypted emails, a small batch of reports she had been shown by a human rights lawyer. They detailed covert operations linked to a Western intelligence agency and local suppression efforts in Central Africa. It had been horrifying, but it had never gone public. "How do you know about that?" she asked quietly. Colbert blinked. "It's just a rumor. I assumed it wasn't true." She didn't answer. Her silence said enough. Backstage, her chief of staff stood up. "We're pulling her now." But before they could act, a red light blinked above the stage, a signal to extend the segment. Someone higher up had made a decision. The trap wasn't closing yet. They wanted more. Stephen smiled politely. We can cut that if it makes you uncomfortable. Megan didn't smile back. Let's move on. But nothing moved on. The energy had shifted again, not just for her, but for everyone watching. Something was unraveling. The story was no longer just about fame or controversy or the monarchy. It was bigger, older, and more dangerous. Far away in a quiet Washington office, a woman in a navy suit picked up her phone. She's being targeted, she said calmly. And she doesn't even know who's behind it yet. Do we intervene? A voice on the other end asked. Not yet, she replied. Let her walk a little further into the fire. Let's see who else shows up. Maya Reese hadn't slept in over 36 hours. Her desk was covered in notes, printouts, flash drives, and old photographs. Coffee cups stood like soldiers guarding classified secrets. The name Project Redemption echoed in her mind like a bell. In an empty hallway, something big was hidden behind that name. She could feel it in her bones. She knew Clint Walker had been trying to say something that night on Jimmy Cale's show. His words weren't random. They were careful, measured, loaded. He had dropped a warning, not a meltdown. Maya was trained to listen for what wasn't being said. She traced the name Project Redemption through old newspaper archives and digital leaks. Most results were blank, but in one dark web forum for ex-government contractors, the name popped up in a 2004 post. It said, Redemption was real. Not a mission, a movie, a warning. Shut down, buried, Walker wrote it. They burned it, but he kept something. She stared at that line. He kept something. Maya dug deeper. Clint Walker had once registered a screenplay in 1993 with the Writers Guild titled Redemption, a true American tale. It was never made. The file had no public summary, no cast, no updates. The name of the studio that owned the rights. Cobalt Pictures, a production company that mysteriously folded the same year the film was announced. She called a retired Hollywood agent who had worked in that era. Redemption, said over the phone. That was supposed to be Clint's legacy piece. A deep, dark political story. Not his usual cowboy stuff. Why wasn't it made? The agent went silent. Then, he whispered, he was warned. I remember him saying once, if I finish that film, I won't finish my life. Maya sat in silence. A few hours later, she received a message, a blocked number, no name. The text read, You want the truth? Start with the man who disappeared. In Quito, March 1990, she searched the name, Quito, Ecuador. 1990, only one news story came up. American journalist presumed dead after chasing CIA corruption story. The name was Thomas Greer. He had vanished while investigating U.S. involvement in a military coup in Ecuador. Greer's final article draft, found in a hotel drawer, mentioned a Hollywood pipeline, a term Maya hadn't seen before. What did it mean? She kept digging. The deeper she went, the more threads appeared. Actors visiting war zones. Film sets near military bases. Defense contracts tied to movie production budgets. Clint had traveled to Ecuador in 1989, supposedly, for scenery scouting. But that same week, a rebel leader backed by the U.S. took power. Coincidence? Maya didn't believe in coincidences. She built a timeline. Clint's movements lined up perfectly with key political events. 1986. Visits. Nicaraguan week before a CIA-backed arms drop. 1989. Ecuador. 1993. Redemption screenplay registered. 1994. Studio folds. 2025. Live interview Confrontation. Clint hadn't just seen things. He had been part of something. Maya reached out to someone she never thought she'd contact again, Sebastian Velez. A hacker activist who once leaked drone strike data. He now lived in exile in Madrid. She sent him the Writers Guild ID for Clint's script. Can you find the original file? Took Sebastian 2 days. Then he emailed her an encrypted folder. Inside was a copy of the redemption screenplay. But it wasn't just a film script. It read like a confession. The story followed a fictional actor, Jack West, who becomes entangled in a CIA mission. While filming a movie in South America, slowly, he realizes the movie is a cover. The crew includes real agents. The props are real weapons. And the revolution they're pretending to film is actually happening. Jack tries to stop it. He fails. People die. The revolution succeeds. The truth is buried. And in the final scene, Jack sits in an empty theater watching fake war footage that he helped create. His hands shake. His eyes are full of guilt. At the bottom of the last page was a handwritten note. I was there. I said nothing. I made films. They made war. C.W. Maya stared at the screen. This wasn't fiction. It was testimony. Clint had tried to warn the world 30 years ago, and they silenced him. She called Sebastian. This is real. No, he replied. And if I found it, others will too. You need to move fast. Maya packed her laptop and printed the script. She was preparing to publish a story when her phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. This time, a voice. Low, calm, confident. I know what you found, it said. Walk away. This isn't your fight. Who are you? A name you won't find on Google. Let's just say I once stood in Clint's shoes. He tried to expose the system from inside. They crushed him. You won't survive what he couldn't. Maya stayed silent. I can help you, the voice said. But only if you're willing to go where he couldn't. Click, the call ended. Maya sat frozen. Outside, the night was still. But inside, everything was moving. She looked again at the final line of Clint's script. They made war. She whispered to herself, and I'm going to make it public. Because Project Redemption wasn't just a film. It was a warning, and now it was evidence. 3. Days after Maya found Clint Walker's lost screenplay, her world started to crack. She was followed on her way home. First, a black SUV parked outside her building for hours. Then her phone glitched, calls dropped mid-sentence, apps froze, and a strange clicking sound echoed during recordings. She knew these tricks. Seen them in war zones, surveillance, tracking, quiet threats. They knew she had the script. They knew she was close to something dangerous. Still, she didn't stop. Instead, she boarded a train out of D.C. under a fake name and took a burner phone. Her destination, a remote cabin in Utah, once owned by Clint Walker. It had been empty since the interview fallout. No one had heard from him. Some believed he had gone into hiding. Others whispered darker theories. Maya had one goal: find out what Clint left behind. The cabin stood alone between wide desert hills. Cold wind moved across the land like a whisper. When Maya unlocked the front door, she stepped into a ghost's home. Dust covered the shelves. Books sat untouched. A guitar leaned against the fireplace, its strings broken. She searched the house carefully. Every drawer, every book, every floorboard, nothing. Then she noticed something strange in the study. A framed photo of Clint with an old director was slightly crooked. When she straightened it, she heard a click. The bookshelf next to it creaked open, revealing a narrow space behind the wall. A hidden compartment. Inside it was a wooden box covered in black cloth. She opened it. There were 3 items. A flash drive, labeled "Play If They Silence Me." A photo of Clint, younger, sitting at a long table with 5 men in suits. One of them had a Pentagon badge. Another wore sunglasses. Inside the room, a worn notebook. Inside it were dates, names, and one chilling sentence written in red ink. They used film to sell war. I helped them. I can't die with it. Maya inserted the flash drive into her laptop, heart pounding. A video began. It was low resolution, shaky, filmed on an old camcorder. Clint Walker sat in front of a fireplace, looking older, tired, but Steady. He stared into the lens. "If you're watching this," he said, "then it means I either disappeared or they made sure I wouldn't speak again." He paused. "I've lived long enough to know what happens when truth knocks on the wrong doors. I made movies, they made war. Somewhere in between, we shook hands." Clint explained how the U.S. government used certain filmmakers during the Cold War not just to entertain, but to shape public opinion. Real operations were carried out under the cover of movie shoots. Stories were changed, enemies created, wars marketed. He had been brought in because of his influence, his face, his voice. They asked him to direct a patriotic film in Central America. But once there, he realized it wasn't a film, it was a disguise for a coup. "I should have walked away," he said. "But I didn't. I played along. Then I tried to make redemption, to confess, to warn the world. They buried it." He looked straight at the camera. "But truth doesn't stay buried forever." The screen turned black. Maya sat in silence, staring at her screen. Her hands shook. She had seen a lot in her career, but this felt different. This wasn't a leak. This was a bomb. And she knew what she had to do. Before she could upload the footage, her laptop shut. Down suddenly, the screen went black. Then her phone rang. Blocked number. Again? She picked up. "You were warned," the voice said. "Now you're trespassing on classified ground." Maya didn't speak. The voice continued. "That footage will never reach the public. We'll make sure of it. You think you're the first journalist to chase ghosts? You won't be the last to disappear." Then silence. She felt cold, not from the wind, but from fear. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she drove to a small town nearby and met with someone she trusted, Elias Chen, a tech-savvy activist who had helped whistleblowers escape surveillance in the past. Elias examined the drive, shaking his head. "I already touched it. There's a trace." "Someone tried to delete parts remotely." Maya looked up. "Can we recover it?" "Maybe. But if we upload this, they'll come fast." "Then let's be faster." They set up a secure transfer. But halfway through, Elias froze. "What is this?" The video had embedded GPS metadata. One of the files had been tagged from a U.S. military satellite, meaning Clint was watched, recorded, possibly by the government itself. Someone had been spying on Clint during his confession. Maya's heart sank. That meant they had a copy. That meant her upload might trigger alarms across multiple agencies. But it also meant this was real. The envelope reached London first. Inside the newsroom of a respected global media outlet, journalist Amir Qureshi opened the plain package. No return address, no sender name. Just a small flash drive and a single line typed in bold. "They made war. Now show the world how." At first, Amir thought it was a prank, okay? But when he played the files, his hands began to shake. The drive contained raw video reel footage from inside a government war room. The room was dimly lit, filled with military officers, intelligence agents, and two men in suits that looked like they belonged to Hollywood. Clint Walker was one of them. The year time-stamped on the video, 1990. It started with a satellite map of a South American city. One officer pointed at key targets: TV stations, fuel plants, a university. The mission: destabilize the government using non-military influence. That meant creating unrest through propaganda, including the production of a fake documentary filmed in the region with actors playing oppressed citizens and fake rebels. Then came the shocking part. One of the men in the room suggested using a Hollywood crew to make the fake footage feel authentic. The others agreed. That was when Clint, younger and quiet, raised a hand. "What happens when the press finds out?" A colonel replied, "That's the beauty of it. The press will find out. But by the time they do, the story will already be shaped hand. They'll report our version." Amir watched the whole video twice. This wasn't fiction. This wasn't theory. This was proof. Amir immediately contacted Maya Rees through a secure channel. She had gone dark for 5 days, constantly on the move. When she finally responded, her voice was low, tired, but sharp. "You've seen the war room tapes?" she asked. "Yes," Amir replied. "This changes everything." "No," she said. "This confirms everything." Maya had already seen parts of the tape before. She had spent the last few days trying to recover corrupted files from Clint's original drive. Elias Cheen had managed to clean some of it up. But what Amir had was clean, full, and uncut. She knew what this meant. The media, the government, and the entertainment industry had collaborated to build fake stories and use them as weapons. Clint's last film idea, Redemption, wasn't just his guilt. It was his map. Maya told Amir to hold off on publishing. Wait until the rest of the journalists get their packages. If we release this together, they can't stop it. But someone else had already taken action. That night, a news leak appeared from a foreign power, possibly China or Russia. A series of diplomatic cables were published anonymously, showing that the U.S. had used film and media as part of covert operations in 12 different countries between 1985 and 2002. And the most shocking part, some of those films won major awards. Suddenly, the world was watching. Was Hollywood involved in real warfare? At the same time, Maya discovered another video, Clint's personal recording. The one she had feared was lost forever. In it, Clint sat at a desk. The fire behind him flickered. "I made the films. I saw the edits. They didn't just cut scenes. They turned wars into scripts. Turned scripts into weapons." He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old VHS tape. "This is the original Redemption. It's not the Hollywood draft. The one I wrote by hand. The one they said could start a war if released." He held the tape for a long moment. "I didn't leak it back then because I was scared. But I'm not scared anymore." That was the last time Clint Walker was ever seen on video. 3 days later, the world learned that Clint had died in his sleep. Official cause, stroke. But Maya didn't believe it. And neither did Elias. And neither did the millions of people who had watched the leaked tapes by then. Protests erupted outside major news networks. People demanded answers. Questions filled the air. How many films had been faked? How many? Stories were planted. How long had this been happening? Jimmy Cale, the talk show host who had sparked it all, gave a press statement. "I didn't know the full truth," he said. "They asked me to provoke him, to rattle him. I thought it was just for ratings." Maya watched him on TV. She didn't feel anger. She felt pity. Cale had become part of the machine. Just another player in the game Clint had tried to expose. But Clint had left one final gift. Before his death, he had set up a time-delayed message set to email the War Room video, the script, and his confession to every major news outlet, university archive, and documentary filmmaker in the world. The truth was now too wide to erase. And Maya, she was no longer hiding. She walked into the newsroom of Global Wire and handed the full file to their editor. "This isn't a story," she said. "This is the autopsy of a lie." The editor, stunned, asked, "You sure you want to do this?" "Once it's out, you'll have enemies, powerful ones." Maya nodded. "They already tried to bury him. I'm not letting them bury his truth." The editor paused, then said, "Let's publish." And with one click, the War Room tapes went live. In homes, schools, and newsrooms across the world, people watched in silence as the mask fell off. The truth wasn't pretty, but it was real. And once it was seen, it could never be unseen again. The War Room tapes had gone public. There was no turning back. Every major network, independent platform, and social media feed was now filled with clips of generals, agents, and Hollywood producers planning operations like scenes from a movie. The world had been watching fiction, thinking it was truth. Governments began to panic. In the United States, the White House held an emergency press conference. The president, looking tired and tense, called the leaked material an attack. on our national history taken out of context. He said Clint Walker had been misled and that no illegal operations were ever done knowingly with media involvement. But no one believed it. Germany, Brazil, South Africa, and Japan demanded answers. Their leaders called for international investigations. Several of the leaked documents showed how news events in their countries were shaped, bent, or even faked to match American interests. The United Nations held a rare night session. Maya Rees watched it all from a small studio apartment in New York. She had moved again, staying off the radar, only using burner phones and encrypted emails. But she wasn't hiding anymore. She had become a symbol. A journalist who brought down the mask of media manipulation and Clint Walker. He was no longer a fallen actor. He was now seen as a fallen whistleblower. But the danger wasn't over. Maya had received a message that morning from Elias Chen. They're fighting back. The U.S. intelligence community launched a counter-operation. They began a campaign to discredit the tapes, claiming the footage had been deep-faked. Experts were brought on air to say the voices could have been recreated, the faces digitally edited. They flooded the internet with fake leaks, fake stories, and fake witnesses, trying to muddy the water. It almost worked until an old CIA whistleblower stepped forward. His name was Samuel Trask, and he had worked on media coordination projects for over 20 years. His face was pale, his eyes empty from guilt, but his voice was clear. What Clint exposed was only the surface. He said in a video testimony, "We didn't just help tell stories. We helped decide which stories could be told." He confirmed the war room was real. He confirmed Clint's involvement. And he confirmed something no one had expected. Jimmy Cale was briefed. That shook the world. According to Trask, before Clint's interview, Jimmy had been given a file by a government contact. It contained talking points, quotes to trigger Clint emotionally, and a list of questions designed to make him snap. Maya's blood went cold when she heard that. She watched the interview again. Every smile, every joke, every shift in Jimmy's tone was all carefully controlled. A setup. Jimmy Cale held another press conference that evening, this time with no jokes, no crew, no audience. He sat alone. "I was told Clint was becoming a threat," he said. "They said he might say things that could damage people. I was told to keep the interview light, then push him hard, make him stumble, make him look unwell." He swallowed hard, but he didn't stumble. He stood. "I became part of the machine that tried to silence him." The public reaction was instant. Protests erupted outside network studios. Late-night shows were canceled or boycotted. Streaming platforms began deleting old episodes connected to political propaganda. Viewers wanted real content now, not carefully controlled entertainment. But there was another side to it, a darker side. Some political groups in the U.S. and abroad used the leaks as fuel to stir up unrest. They twisted Clint's message, claiming it proved every conspiracy theory they had ever believed. Some even suggested the entire system had to fall. Riots broke out in some cities. People set fire to theaters, attacked journalists, and even stormed media headquarters demanding truth. Maya watched all of this with a heavy heart. This wasn't what Clint wanted. He didn't want war, he wanted awareness. He didn't want revenge, he wanted redemption. In the chaos, Maya received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a note that said, "The last truth. Use it wisely." She plugged it in. A short video played. Clint Walker, again. Time. Older, slower, filmed weeks before his death. He sat by a window, light pouring over his shoulder. His face was thin, but his eyes still sharp. "I know what they'll say when I'm gone," he said. "That I lost my mind. That I turned against my country. But that's not true." 1 year had passed since the War Room tapes were released. The world had changed, but only on the surface. There were new headlines now, new distractions. A scandal in one country. a natural disaster in another. The media moved on, as it always did, but not everyone forgot. In a small cabin near the California mountains, Maya Rees sat by the window, writing in a worn notebook. The room was quiet, except for the wind outside and the soft hum of a radio playing a jazz tune from the 1950s. She had left the noise behind New York, the studios, the interviews. All of it. The world had taken Clint's truth and turned it into documentaries, awards, debates. But slowly, quietly, the machine had begun to repair itself. Networks rebranded. Agencies renamed. Faces changed. But behind the curtain, the power remained the same. That's why Maya hadn't stopped. Her organization, the Walker Foundation, had grown quietly across borders. Independent journalists, whistleblowers, filmmakers, it had become a global net of watchers. A mirror to power. A place where hidden truths were stored safely. But today was different. Today, Maya received a message she never expected. A package. No name, just coordinates written on a plain white card. GPS coordinates pointing to a place in rural Nevada, near an old military base that had been shut down for decades. She made the decision within minutes. By nightfall, she was driving through the desert, headlights cutting through sand and silence. She arrived at the spot just past midnight. There was no building, no guards, just dirt and wind. But the signal on her phone changed. One bar. A private network. She followed it, walking toward a group of rocks that didn't look natural. She touched one end, it moved. A hidden door. Inside was a narrow staircase, steep and cold. At the bottom, a room, dark, silent, and filled with screens. Old monitors, satellite feeds, radio equipment, and file cabinets. In the center of the room sat a man in a wheelchair, his back turned, watching a grainy black and white video of a jungle conflict. He spoke without turning around. "I didn't think you'd come." Maya froze. The voice, slow, raspy, Clint Walker. She stepped forward, stunned. "You're alive." Clint turned slowly, his face lined thinner, but unmistakably real. "I had to die," he said. "They wouldn't let me live with what I knew." Maya didn't speak. She sat across from him, heart pounding. Clint began to explain. When the first wave of leaks happened and the tapes went public, someone inside the intelligence network warned him. They offered him a choice, vanish or die for real. "They said I was too iconic to kill publicly, too risky," he said. "So they buried me quietly and gave me this one last outpost." He looked around the bunker. Everything I didn't have time to release is here." Maya walked to one of the walls. Maps, redacted files, news scripts with editor markings. Some documents dated back to the Cold War. Others were marked with dates only weeks old. "You've been tracking them?" "This whole time," she whispered. Clint nodded. "They're changing strategies. Less film, more algorithm. They use entertainment, but also social media apps, influencers. It's the same system, new mask." Maya's eyes burned. It felt like the world had only just started waking up, and already the darkness had shifted shape. "There's one more thing," Clint said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a black box. Inside was a microchip. "It's not just documents anymore," he said. "It's control software, designed to manipulate public behavior through ad targeting and emotional spikes. They tested it during elections, riots, even pandemic responses." Maya's hands shook as she picked it up. "This is the next war," Clint said. "Not guns, not films. Minds." She looked at him. "Why tell me now?" Clint leaned back. "Because I'm dying. It's for real this time. No cameras, no scripts. Just time running out." There was silence between them. Then Maya asked the question that had lived in her heart since the night he walked off that stage. "Why did you do it, Clint? Why now? After all those years staying silent?" He looked at her with tired eyes. Because one day I looked in the mirror and didn't see him, and I saw a role I had played too long. And roles eventually end. A tear rolled down Maya's cheek. She knew what she had to do. Clint handed her a small envelope. Inside, keys, codes, and a new list of name targets. Insiders, media collaborators, still active. Burn it all, he said. And build something better. She left the bunker before sunrise. The desert sky turned gold as her car cut through the silence. Back in New York, the Walker Foundation released the final files. The chip, the names, the proof. Within days, governments fell. Tech giants were called before international courts. New global laws were passed to break the control systems of media-engineered influence. It wasn't clean, it wasn't quick. But it was the beginning of something honest. Maya visited Clint's grave 6 months later. It was unmarked, just a stone in a quiet field overlooking the hills. She placed a single photo on the grassa, still from his last film, The Real Redemption. Him on a horse, looking out at a rising sun. "Ride easy, cowboy," she whispered. "Ah, your story's been told." Ah. And as she walked away, the wind carried his last words with her. They can bury stories. But not all of us will go quietly.